A provision buried inside the latest US defense bill is attracting growing scrutiny, not because of how much money it allocates, but because of what it could do to the future of US Israel relationship. The measure is known as Section 224. It sits inside the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, the annual legislation that sets US defense policy. On the surface, it is framed as a technology cooperation initiative, but analysts say it could represent something more significant, a shift from military assistance to military integration. The United States and Israel already cooperate extensively on defense. Washington funds and supports programs such as Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow. The two countries share intelligence and maintain close military ties. Section 224 goes further. It calls for the appointment of a dedicated Pentagon official to coordinate cooperation across a wide range of technologies, including artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, cyber defense, missile defense, and advanced sensing. It also refers to network integration and data fusion language that suggests deeper linking of military systems and information infrastructure. The debate is not really about whether the US and Israel cooperate today. They already do. The question is whether Congress is now trying to institutionalize that cooperation in a way that it becomes difficult for future administrations to unwind. That debate comes at a politically sensitive moment. Public opinion in the United States has become increasingly divided over military support for Israel, particularly since the war in Gaza and the broader regional escalation involving Iran and Lebanon. Recent polling suggests support for unconditional military aid is weakening, while calls for restriction or conditions on weapon transfers have grown. Yet at the same time, lawmakers are considering a measure that could move key parts of the relationship beyond the realm of annual aid debates and into long-term defense planning, procurement, and research.
But this is not unusual. I mean, the United States has had similar arrangements with other countries. Pakistan was once a very close defense ally of the United States. We were in CETO, CENTO, and other alliances. We are still what they call the closest circle of friends outside NATO. That's called the non-NATO ally. So Pakistan still is technically a non-NATO ally of the United States. The United States has always formed defense agreements, defense alliances, defense pacts with other countries. And obviously, Israel is the closest US ally in the world. No other countries have been so close to the United States, as no other country has supported the United States so blindly, and the United States has not supported any other country so strongly. So I think it is only natural, if they want to have closer cooperation between the two militaries, between the two forces, it's only a natural extension of an already very close relationship between the United States and Israel.
Critics argue that this is precisely what makes the proposal controversial. Military aid can be reduced, weapon sales can be delayed, diplomatic support can change from one administration to the next. Joint technology development is different. Defense programs often operate over decades. Once research institutions, defense contractors, and military systems become interconnected, reversing course becomes far more difficult and politically costly. Some analysts describe this as an institutional lock-in. In other words, the relationship becomes less dependent on political consensus because it is built into the machinery of the government itself. The implications extend beyond Washington. The technologies listed in the proposal include surveillance systems, autonomous platforms, artificial intelligence, and advanced targeting capabilities. Critics argue that any breakthrough developed jointly under such programs could ultimately be deployed in places where Israeli forces are operating, including Gaza and the West Bank.
So there is certainly an obligation on states who sell weapons, who develop weapons, sell weapons, and states who jointly develop weapons with other countries under international law, under international humanitarian law, which are the laws of war, the laws of armed conflict, conventions like the Geneva Conventions, other international treaties, such as the Arms Trade Treaty. They all impose obligations on states, and this really stems from the core obligation, which is Common Article 1 of the Geneva Conventions, and this is an article which is common to all 4 of the Geneva Conventions that we have, and it essentially imposes an obligation on states to respect international humanitarian law, right, the laws of war. But that responsibility, that obligation is wider than just me as a state having to abide by IHL. It also requires that I ensure the respect of IHL by other states as well, right? So if I'm selling weapons to another state, there is an obligation on me to ensure that at least those weapons are not used in a way that would commit war crimes, and create some sort of obligation there. When it comes to developing weapons, states are under an obligation there as well, not to develop, say, indiscriminate weapons or weapons that can cause unnecessary harm and suffering. This is a customary international law obligation, which has been now enshrined in Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions. This really looks at weapons law, Additional Protocol 1. And even though the US and Israel and many countries have not signed on to Additional Protocol 1, it is still customary international law. And what that means is that it is binding on these states, regardless of whether they have signed a treaty that codifies this or has it written down. Another issue that we need to look at is the states that help other states do internationally wrongful acts, they are then liable for those acts as well, right? So we have, the Articles on State Responsibility that have been developed by the International Law Commission, and Article 16 in particular states that states have responsibility under international law. If they aid and abet or aid and assist another state in an internationally wrongful act, they will be held responsible. And the requirement here really is knowledge, right? Did they have knowledge that, say, providing those weapons or jointly developing those weapons would be used for war crimes? Now, in the particular case of Israel, and in the case of Article 224 being Section 224 becoming part of US law and really causing that integration, we're seeing Israel coming off the back of a genocide, committing a genocide, widely accused across the world of being involved in a genocide. And even if we were to, for the sake of argument, put that argument to one side, say, genocide, the number of war crimes that have been committed are astronomical. The type of, what Israel has done, the decimation, the annihilation of the people really in Gaza that it's done, flattening entire cities, those are clearly war crimes. And the United States is under an obligation, whether it is the Geneva Conventions, Article 1, whether it is the Articles of State Responsibility, which are customary international law, whether it is the customary international law obligation that is also codified in Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1 in terms of developing new weapons, not to do so when it comes to Israel, because the United States is in a very problematic situation, because it took 2 years for Israel to prosecute its war, and during those 2 years the United States kept on providing weapons, and much of the weapons that were dropped weren't just stockpiles in these IDF armies. These were brand new weapons that were shipped to Israel from the US to use in the particular violations and genocide that it was committing. So there is certainly a level of complicity, and there's certainly a level of responsibility that falls on the US. And then to reward a country that has been involved in this sort of blatant disregard of international law and blatant disregard for the most fundamental aspects of international law, genocide, right? Rewarding them with greater integrated military technology development, integrating them into their own military systems, I think is certainly something that the US should stay away from. This is something that is harming the international comity of nations and how the world works in this regard.
The proposal is also being viewed through a broader regional lens. Some analysts see it as part of a longer-term effort to build regional security, architecture centered around Israel, extending the logic of Abraham Accords beyond diplomatic normalization and into military and technological cooperation that would have implications not only for Palestinians but also for countries such as Iran, Lebanon, and even regional powers like Turkey. For supporters, the argument is straightforward. Israel is one of America's closest allies, and emerging technologies require deeper cooperation. For opponents, the concern is that Congress may be making a long-term strategic choice at a time when the choice is becoming more contested among the American public.
Okay, see, what's happening in there is, during this war, Iran showed resilience, okay? It was able to thwart American military operations, prevent America and Israel from achieving their stated goal, which is to bring a change of government in Iran, okay? That did not happen. Then, because it is a smaller country, it does not match the US and Israeli military power. Iran also did another thing. They to counter the US military power, they started attacking US military bases in the Gulf countries, saying that because these are the bases of a country that is in war with Iran, so those are actually enemies' bases. And that created a sense of insecurity among Gulf states. And now what the Americans here in Washington see as happening is that because those Gulf countries now feel more insecure than they ever did before, so they will seek more support from the Americans. They will seek more military hardware from the Americans, and they would want America to strengthen their military bases on their soil. And that is something America is willing to oblige with. Then there is also an effort to form a particular alliance which will be based on Abraham Accords. That is, countries that recognize Israel and are willing to work with Israel with America's support to counter Iran. So we will see a lot of strategic and political changes, new alliances being formed in the region.
The legislation still faces a long road before becoming law. It can be amended, rewritten, or removed altogether. But its inclusion in the defense bill highlights an important shift in how some policymakers are thinking about the US-Israel relationship. The debate is no longer about how much support Washington should provide. It is increasingly about whether that support should become structurally embedded with the next generation of military technology, defense production, and strategic planning.
This certainly makes it more difficult for the US to distance itself from Israel by rewarding it and integrating further, knowing full well that it has been involved in some of the most heinous crimes that the international legal system has a name for. But having said that, the United States really is not, in it to distance itself from Israel's actions. We didn't see much distancing under the Biden administration. We certainly haven't seen anything of the sort under Trump's administration. If anything, we've seen a doubling down of supporting Israel, even the attacks on Iran and whatnot. So I'm not too confident or too concerned about what's going to come out of this. This has been already in the works. There has been close cooperation between the United States and Israel, and this is simply more of the same in that regard. So these defense authorization acts and these laws that are passed, especially when it comes to budgets, these are easily reversible because, just as they've been made into law, they can be undone that way. The problem is the political cost in doing so. If this is, say, not continued in subsequent years, it becomes problematic for people who are, in a pro-Israel, part of the pro-Israeli lobby. So it becomes politically difficult for them, especially if you get a president who is like Trump, another Republican who is very much in support of the Israeli project. That becomes something that is very difficult to then undo. Are future presidents bound by this? Not really. I mean, they can prosecute their strategies and their policies in a different way, and there is room for them to maneuver. There really aren't these permanent restrictions like that, and it's certainly not part of the U.S. Constitution that restricts them like that. We've also seen Trump do away with many of the strictures that apply to presidents. He doesn't care about those, and it seems that perhaps closer to the end he might just pardon himself, so he doesn't have to face any of the music, any sort of impeachment or anything of that sort later on.